What's up, guys? Today I'm going to show you guys how to do a repair on a TBS Triumph antenna. A couple disclaimers before we get started. One, I know there's been a few questions about does this reduce range or does this reduce video quality. I have flown all the ones that I've replaced, and for racing purposes, so up to 300 yards, I haven't seen any degradation in signal quality or effective range. If you get out to the far stretches of the antenna, it may affect it a little bit, but for $1 and you can fix it on the spot, I think it's worth a mod that's worth it. But let's go ahead and get started. First, I'm gonna go over a few of the tools that I'll use while I'm doing the repair. Set of dikes, any set of dikes will do. Just something to cut your wire with. Some heat shrink. This looks like 5mm heat shrink. X-Acto knife, razor knife, anything that you want. This is just to be able to cut the sheathing and such on the antenna. Small file. I think these are jeweler's files that I have. These work great, but you will need something to help file down some of the solder and some of the sheathing. Really helps to have a pair of tweezers because these pins for this SMA are super small and kind of hard to handle with your hands. I recommend a little bit of flux. This is like a liquid flux. It really helps the solder flow into the brass pin that goes inside your SMA. I'll show you more about that later, but it really seems to help me at least. Solder. Soldering iron. And obviously your damaged Triumph. Okay, so what we have here is our damaged Triumph. What we're going to do is we're going to cut this black outer sheathing back. I don't have the exact measurements for you, but I will take them whenever we get to a finished product. But what we have to have is we have to have the sheathing cut back the farthest, and then the ground sheathing, we have to cut it nice and smooth. We want it smooth all the way around so that we don't have any frays that could possibly contact that inner wire. And then we'll cut the wax surface back. It'll all be tapered. This will be cut back the furthest, then the sheathing next, then the wax layer next, and then we'll start trimming the wire itself back until everything fits in there just like it's supposed to. It's not too bad of a process. You just have to cut off as little as possible to accomplish your goal. So first thing I'll do is cut this back. I did swap out to the X-Acto knife. It's a little sharper than my other one. And the jacket provides a little bit of protection underneath this black sheathing. And that black sheathing is pretty thick stuff, so you may have to put a little bit of force into it. Okay, so you see I got that cut back right there. Now, and you want to be able to leave a little bit of this sheathing because that's what you have to solder to. So I'm just going to cut it back as little as possible here and just work your way around. It may take a couple of passes to get it all cut, especially if you're trying to be real careful about how deep you go. Let's see if that was enough or if I need to go around again. I think I need to go around again. Okay. Pretty sure that's good enough. It is in some places, but not others. There we go. That's my dog Remy, in case anybody was curious. Okay, so now we've got the sheathing cut back, and then we have the ground sheathing cut back there. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and cut this wire off because it's useless to us with the old connector on there. Okay, now this part right here is where you kind of have to take your time and make sure that you don't cut too much, because you'll see as we press this in there, it's only going to go so far because of that wax layer. Okay, you see how we're still short, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 millimeters. So what we're going to do is just to gather how far we need to go, we're going to go ahead and start here. Okay, and all this is, or all this seems to be, is just a little wax layer, so it cuts through pretty easily. And then you'll feel it go all the way through. And then we have our wire exposed. So now we'll go ahead and put this back on here. And so you can see right now that I got a pretty good amount of room. I think that's probably pretty good on the sheathing. Obviously you want these as close as you can, but I haven't seen, like I said, I haven't seen any degradation. I'm going to trim off just a hair more here. I haven't seen any degradation by having just a little bit of play in there. But you do, I had somebody comment on one of my videos, you do want to try to keep these tolerances as tight as you can manage, because any outside variables on your wire can affect it. But just go slow and make sure you don't cut off too much and you'll be okay. Alright, so we've cut it again. So now when I push that on there, that's looking good. That's looking almost perfect. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'm going to get my tweezers here because that's a really small piece. I'm going to grab our pin. Okay. Now on the pin, we're just going to slide it on the wire. Make sure it's, whoops. Okay. And just make sure it's fully seated, which it is. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and put this back on here. We're going to see how it stopped way earlier than where we had it before. So we're going to pull the pin back off. We're going to take and we're going to snip just a little bit of wire off. Be very easy with how much wire you snip off. The first time I did this, I snipped off what I thought was a small amount and it ended up being too much. I had to cut everything back further. And obviously every time you do this, it's going to be it's going to have a little bit less room for you to work with. Okay, see how I need to go just a hair more, okay, to get where we were before we installed the pin. So we're going to take off just the smallest amount. Okay, that's looking good. I like that, and you can see the pin is protruding just right. It has a little stop in there, so it'll prevent you from going too far with it. Just don't force it, because you can force it all the way through. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we have to solder the pin to the wire. Okay, I love using sticky tack. That's probably my favorite. So it doesn't stick to my mat very well. That's why I'm using the box. So something that I do recommend though, all right, before I get too far here, is, you know, we talked about the flux earlier. Get you some flux on this pin. All right, I found that getting that solder to flow inside this brass pin. Okay, I know you can't see it, but there's a little bitty microscopic hole right there for the solder to flow inside this pin. Okay, you don't have to get a ton in there, but you do have to get something in there, and the flux really seems to help flow that solder into that little bitty hole. Okay, I've got my iron set at 750 Fahrenheit for this. I don't know if that's the end-all be-all temperature, but it seems to work well for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just get us a little solder on there. Okay, that's warm in case anybody was curious. Okay, we're just going to try to flow that solder into that hole. Get something to push it back. Okay, let it dry for a second. It's hard. It's kind of hard to tell when you have enough in there. So what I normally do is do kind of a jerk test. And sometimes it works on the first try, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so that one's good. Okay, and I don't know if you can see, but we have a little bit of solder sticking up on the side of the pin. It's gonna happen. You can't avoid it. All right. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our little jeweler's file here. Okay, and we're just gonna take and file down that extra solder on the outside. You don't have to get crazy with it. You don't have to take all of it off, but you do have to get it filed down a bit. Sorry if that was out of frame. Okay, do another little jerk test. Whoops. So now we're going to take and slide this on, make sure it goes on. There we go. Slides on there perfectly. Okay, so something I always forget, always forget, is my heat shrink. Do not forget your heat shrink. Okay, so they're on there. Don't forget the heat shrink. Okay, and you'll see there's a hole in this SMA connector as well. Okay, I don't use that hole. You can if you want. More power to you. I don't use it. Okay, go write that again. All right, now the trick on this solder joint is you just kind of have to work the solder around with your iron. Okay, obviously soldering a solid surface, anybody that's soldered solid wire knows that it's a pain in the butt. Okay, you have to work the solder around the joint. Okay, so we're just kind of walking it around. See, we got the solder on there. It's not really wanting to work around for us, but that's okay. We can get it there. Okay, just got to be patient with it. You're not going to hurt anything. Okay, just get it on there. Get you some solder on there. It may not look pretty when you start, but that's okay, because whenever you just keep that heat to it, and you can use that. See how it just works around there? There we go. Okay, see there? Nice all the way around. And we're back. Okay, all I did while we were away, that little solder joint that was around the bottom of this SMA, I took a file to it and just took off any large burrs that got left. When you're dragging the solder around, sometimes there's almost always little burrs. So I just took my little jeweler's file and I filed them down, and then I slid my first piece of heat shrink down and I shrinked it, and then I slid my second piece down and I shrinked it over the top of the first piece. It seems to give it a little bit of rigidity. And then what I normally do is I'll take a colored piece, you know, depending on what color my quad is that I'm running, and I'll put a colored piece over the whole thing, and it tends to really strengthen it up. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If y'all have any questions or comments, feel free to ask. I'll do my best to answer them. Y'all stay tuned. I'm going to be doing more videos like this and some reviews and some build videos and other things. So you guys stay tuned for some awesome content coming y'all's way.